Good evening. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to this series, New Democracy. It's 16th edition, 15 programs before this. We talked about renewal of the democracy. And tonight's title is Who's Afraid of the People? So Socrates said once that democracy itself will lead to the election of demagogues and dictators. And witnessing today's events, well, today's or yesterday's or last month's events, one could claim that he was right. So tonight we're going to talk about what the pitfalls are of democracy. Is an electoral representative system in a media era with Facebook and all its bubbles inevitably leading to populism? And will the growing reliance on bottom-up initiatives, the bottom-up movement, the DIY, do-it-yourself organizations, are they actually an alternative, or do they promote inequality? What are the strategies and tools to overcome these possible negative effects? Tonight we have a roundtable with a conversation with one international guest from Estonia and 3 Dutch thinkers, activists, well, true democrats, I would say. And we will discuss both the pitfalls and the breakthroughs in current democracies all over Europe and how these can be used to create alternative forms of democratic governance on the local as well as on the European level. For those of you who were here in December in our evening on digital democracy, also this evening is also part of an e-democracy project by Netwerk Democratie, De Waag and the Ministry of Interior and Kingdom Relations to strengthen the use of open source e-participation tools by Dutch local governments. So thank you for all partners for having the second night here. And but more important, this evening is also part of the EU Crowd Conference organized by Netwerk Democratie in light of the European Citizen Crowdsourcing Project EU Crowd. And that has been funded with the support of Europe for Citizens program of the European Union. So we have many partners with much knowledge in the room. Who here is not from the Netherlands? Well, that's more than average in this series. Thank you so much, international crowd, for being here. Otherwise, our room would be empty, almost. And that is probably because people who are interested in democracy are probably now all watching television, because in 15 minutes, the last political debate of the national elections, which are actually tomorrow, is played out. So we're not surprised that many people didn't show up tonight because they want to see the debate, although everybody who have seen like the 26 debates already will actually not hear loads of new things tonight, probably because it's so scripted. But anyway, thank you all Dutch people for being here and skipping that fantastic debate. So we have 2 rounds. The first round we'll discuss the pitfalls and how can you think of democracy? What do you mean when you talk about the people? Who is representing who? And then we will talk about the breakthroughs. I mean, the alternatives. How can you actually create a vital, true democracy where people actually are part of the demos in having the power, so are actually experiencing real democracy. That's the idea. It's an open discussion. So there are 4 people at the table plus me. That's 5 chairs. There are people in the front rows who are part of the program or project, and there is one mic, and that's for you guys, for all of you. And you can come whenever you want, if you feel you have something to contribute to the conversation. And actually that is our demand, that you contribute to the conversation. And then we just, involve you in the conversation, and we have a conversation with 6 people, which is perfectly fine. And if you feel that your part has been done or discussed, you sit and let somebody else continue to participate in the conversation. That's the only demand we have. So not questions like, 40 minutes ago you said something interesting. That's not part of the conversation. That's bringing the conversation back to something else, right? Okay? And if I see you, I will be sitting there. I will immediately give you the floor. That's the idea. Is everybody okay with that? Okay. We'll end at about 9:30. And for those who want to see the end of the debate, that's still going on then. Okay. Okay, let's start. Thank you so much. No, not for me. Let's get the table full of people. Hille, can I ask you to join me on the table? Hille Hinsberg. She is a civil society, our international guest. She's a civil society and governance expert, one of the organizers of the People's Assembly in Estonia. And in 2012, the Estonian parliament questioned how they could make Estonian politics more democratic. Great question.
About like that,
yes. And actually you, together with another or a few civil society organizations, you organized the People's Assembly. And we're going to talk about that shortly. And the other person I would like to invite to the table is Dick Pels. He's a sociologist, a political writer. Please join me on stage. He was director of the think tank of GroenLinks, the party of Mr. Jesse Klaver, and worked at the University of Amsterdam-Groningen, research fellow at the Center for European Studies at Harvard University. I'm talking so fast because it's so much to tell. Don't. You're frequently asked to give your political analysis because you have such an interesting vision on the political situation. And one of your books is called The People Do Not Exist. Het volk bestaat niet. And we're going to talk about that probably later. And your latest book is A Heart for Europe. Welcome. Thank you so much for being here. I skipped a lot now. Good. Because of you.
Very good.
The third speaker I would like to ask to come forward is Godelieve van Heteren. She's also, I would say a true Democrat. I mean, she's been a member of the Dutch Parliament for the Social Democrats. With a focus on European international affairs. We see her a lot in het Pakhuis. She's also organizing evenings, especially on democracy, I would say. And you're very interested in democratic renewal initiatives in the Netherlands and Europe, also part of that. Writing articles about it, organizing debates, and being actually a real public intellectual on this subject here in the Netherlands. So great that you're here. Firoez Azarhoosh, the last one, but not the least one, of course. A community... actually we should sit here. The male, female... then gender balance is also in the format, Firoez is a community builder from Amsterdam-Oost, a social entrepreneur, co-founder of the Meevaart, which is a community center in Amsterdam-East, largely based on principles of self-governance. Many management functions, but actually a real expert on local participative democracy, right? And we always ask you if you to shed your light on developments here in Amsterdam or the Netherlands or Europe, if it's concerning about participative democracy, because you actually really understand how you do that and what the principles are and the do's and the don'ts if you really want to make something participative and democratic. So this is our table. This is what we're going to, and of course you guys. So that's the idea. Let's start. I started the title. The title of this evening is "Who's Afraid of the People?" Let's start. Can you start with your assembly is called the People. This is the last time I'm gonna have such an annoyance pronunciation. The People Assembly in Estonia. Could you tell us why you organized it and what you actually did with the assembly? And you have to talk into the mic.
I'll try to be much briefer than I was today earlier at the Ministry of Interior, talking about the experience already a couple of years back, and trying to really enable people to get involved in not politics as such, as such, but political arena and political principles and work procedures. So, if I start, can I pose a question? You probably know a couple of events in history that were started by one person. Yeah, you probably can name a couple of those. Well, in Estonia, the process, the assembly, the citizen crowdsourced deliberative process started with one guy, and the one guy was a politician. He's still alive, but he's not a politician anymore. But he belonged to a ruling coalition party, and he came out with a confession that he has been taking illegal, which means anonymous donations to bring from somewhere to his party. The sums are insignificant. They didn't matter. It was not a big deal. But the way that he talked about this being a sort of common and sort of acknowledged practice within the ruling coalition got people really angry. It was one last straw that launched a whole series of events in Estonia and ended up with me talking about it here, for example. Well, it ended up in lots of results, but how it took place was that after this public confession by one guy about the scandalous kind of hidden and internal procedures in the ruling political party, people took to the streets. And in Estonia, we don't do it usually. We are humble, we are modest, we are, well, the normal, standard European people. Not very southern, as you can see from the geography, so we live inside. But somehow the situation of the lies, the layers of doing something forbidden, doing something illegal, not caring about it within the political corridors, was making us so angry that we organized, not only me, but a team of civic activists organized petitioning with lots of signatures. Then we organized a whole deliberative process, starting by an online tool and filling it up with 6,000 comments on 5 topical issues concerning the political setup and principles. We had to involve the president because by that time the anger was so widespread in the society that no one else could really calm the situation down. We asked a lot of stakeholders to chip in and do their part in the discussions and in the debates. But what is important, you started with the word people, that people took charge. People were so agitated that for the first time, I think we had an event of that scale, that people really contributed to very hard-scale topics, like what kind of procedures are to be tolerated within political parties? What are the rules that actually get the political parties the power that they have? How they are elected, how transparent this is, how the proportional system actually works. What are the usual participatory procedures outside the election period? How should they be organized? How transparent are they? How legitimate are they? What is the actual power that we, the people, can exercise over this kind of thing happening somewhere there? And around these topics, there was online deliberation, there was stakeholder deliberation, there was expert deliberation, and it all was designed into a process that we call crowdsourcing, because that was the people, that was the crowd that actually came out with a list of proposals, analyzed, synthesized, put into clusters, matched and mixed in all sorts of ways. Why? Only to come to a sort of consensus, the sort of agreed set of proposals. And we took them to the parliament, and then the parliament took it forward from there.
How many people participated?
How many is difficult to catch, because in the online phase we had 6,000 comments or proposals that were worked on, but 60,000 people visited the actual website. And then we did small circle stakeholder meetings, and then we did a random sample, demographically representative meeting. If you know, or if you want to know the term of the method, it's deliberative polling. And we sort of copied and pasted it from Mr. John Fishkin, but we modified it because you can't just copy, you have to be innovative. So we did our own adjustments. And actually I met with Professor Fishkin later on. He was not too happy, I have to say, but we still
Do
felt
not modify my method.
Exactly. But we were happy because it produced some results. You were asking about the numbers. I don't think it's important how many were involved.
No, of course. But it's just,
But
is it
it was
20 or 3,000 that matters?
Yes, it's coming from the bottom up,
Yes.
and it went to a lot of very carefully designed procedure.
Yeah.
So it's not just off the top of my head, I'm saying to you, political party, you should do that. It was not like that. So it was very carefully kind
Designed.
of enabled procedure that I think we came up with.
You say it came from the bottom up, but to me it also sounds like it was very structured.
It was structured,
So
but
who
you
did
can't
the
have
structuring?
both. There was a voluntary team, myself included, some other civil society activists, quite many political scientists, and what is important and what I want to stress is that we had this working team of putting this together, and we involved the culprits, the political party representatives. So they were sitting side by side with us. We were debating, sometimes heatedly, but we designed this, we co-created this process together. So yes, they were critical. Yes, sometimes they were laughing. Sometimes they didn't take it all seriously, saying, do you remember Winston Churchill saying that the best recipe to denounce democracy is a 5-minute discussion on the street with an average voter? So what do you hope to get out of a process that involves hundreds and thousands of average voters? I heard this quote quite often, actually.
Yes, I hear it a lot. If you design deliberative processes,
Yes.
right?
So
Why
but
should we talk to ordinary people? We already know what they think
Mhm.
anyway.
But I think it's about the things we learn, that if you build up the process in a way that you are as transparent as possible, as inclusive as possible, going into diverse groups, trying to get them in, trying to be very interactive and communicative about it, trying to be legitimate about it, then at least it counts to something. At least it's not the ordinary, yay, Facebook likes, or something like that. That probably brings down this thing.
Was the question behind your question that bottom-up initiatives should be unstructured?
No. I distrust bottom-up initiatives as a word.
Oh, you
No.
just
So I
said,
want to-
if we talk about bottom-up, oh my God, probably.
No. I want to see, because I think in all initiatives there's people who sort of take the lead or are the energizers.
Facilitate.
I mean, if you've been involved, like we all are, in movements a lot, at some point there's
Somebody
always
has to-
somebody doing something. And so I would like to know, since I don't know your situation very well, I'd like to know who are the people who take this up, who are the people who carry this on, where were the clashes, how bottom, I mean, Estonia is not a huge population, but 60,000 still strikes me as it is a certain segment of the population. So what is bottom in bottom up, and who takes charge? And so, I mean, it's
Sure.
about power. And I
It
would
is
like to
about
know.
power, but I also don't believe that everybody will want this kind of having a say in these kind of topics. And we didn't even aim for it. We just tried to get
As many,
as
everybody who wanted
everybody
could.
who wanted,
That's the
and
idea.
also by organizing the random sample deliberative polling, anybody who would be a representative of different groups to get involved. So to have the voices aboard that usually are not there, are not present.
Exactly.
Usually who are vocal are the people who are kind of most passionate, most interested about these topics,
Yeah.
and they are representing
not
very
involving
thin
everybody.
layer. Yeah,
It's not involving everybody, it's involving everybody who wants to, right?
and everybody who should have a say in it, but it's not going. So the bottom can really be, in a quantitative way, quite small.
Yes.
But that's the difference between everybody who should have a say and everybody who could have a say. Open this deliberation up for everybody. So what exactly do you aim for? Because in a let's say principled idea about democracy, everybody, literally everybody, every individual should have a say. And you just indicated that it doesn't happen. Maybe it isn't necessary.
Can you make anyone to have a say? You can't, probably.
You can't. No, I fully agree. Yeah.
Okay, so in your the People's Assembly, so we are now focusing on the people, the notion of the people. If you would summarize this into a few lines, why did you call it the People's Assembly?
Because it was involving different layers in the society, very different stakeholder groups. The ideas, the proposals came from basically anyone who wanted to be involved.
Yes.
And then, it was elaborated on. So rather than having 6,000 original proposals sent off to Cosmos somewhere towards Parliament, President, government, local municipality, European Union, it doesn't matter who, but rather than sending my dreams and wishes off into outer space, I think the people structured themselves, with help of facilitation, but structured themselves into some kind of target.
Dick, you actually wrote a book where you said that the people do not exist.
Mm-hmm.
Can you explain?
Yes.
Because in democracy, I mean, demos.
Yeah, demos. It's a literal notion about democracy. That's true. But maybe that's a dangerous conception of what democracy, or the democracy that we would like to defend is all about. It's a very slippery concept.
Explain.
I mean, this is in the title of this meeting. Who is afraid of the people? I would rather ask, perhaps, who is afraid of the people who make us afraid of the people, and who are the people then? Do they not construct the people as a dangerous thing, so that we are afraid? It's slippery, and there is a romanticism about the notion of the people, and there is a danger about the notion of the people if you think of it as a homogeneous, monumental, single thing, which is making us afraid of the people. Happens, for example, by picturing the people, as one thing, and it isn't. And you also made that clear, because there's all kinds of layers. What you're talking about what you're calling the people are the non-professionals. So the people outside of the political parties, the other people. So non-professionals, which is a negative conception of the people, not a positive conception.
You said that, I didn't.
No. It's my interpretation of what you're saying. So it's the other people, and it's not all the people. It's a selection, perhaps a small selection of people who are interested, who are sufficiently educated, like yourself. So it's a kind of elite outside the current elite of the political parties, which you also educate because they are learning to discuss. I'm thinking of the experience of, for example, that perhaps more better known here as the G1000.
Not the C1000, the G1000.
I said it was the G1000 of David van Rijbroek. Perhaps you know that David is a Belgian journalist and writer, and he selected a number of people by lot. I don't know exactly. The aim was 1,000, but it ended up with 600. And these people came together, selected by lot over a couple of months, and they were educated. So all kinds of experts came by, and they learned to discuss. And politicians came by, and people became kind of semi-experts. So they began to situate themselves in between what you would maybe call ordinary citizens. I don't know where to find them, but ordinary citizens who are none of these things, who know nothing and know nothing about politics, not interested in politics, but should perhaps participate, on the one hand, and on the other, professional politics, so the establishment, the elite as the populists would identify it. Somewhere in between, which is an interesting position for democracy also, to expand from the professional class to this second layer of people just outside the professional class who are semi-professionalized and who can participate in political debate on a much more regular basis than just 4-year frequency of elections, which is interesting. And you could also point towards referenda and other stuff, in order to broaden the system that we have, the representative system. So I'm not in favor of keeping, the things as they are and deepening the democratic process in this way. But you should get rid of all the romanticism about the people, which we are confronted with when we listen to Geert Wilders and the Danish Volksparty and etc. all over Europe. And that's a dangerous thing. And the problem is, the deepest problem for me as a left-wing liberal Democrat is to notice that the danger is inside the tradition of thinking about democracy. So Socrates was right, in fact. The deepest and earliest notion about democracy, the Athenian notion, is taking this concept literally. So the demos should rule, the people should rule by itself or whatever. And this is what the populists want in a different situation, of course. And since the 17th or whatever, 18th century, we have a different alternative conception of democracy which is developed, which you could call the liberal democratic, as opposed to the populist literal. So it should be. The problem is, of course, that we should think about democracy and try to not to take it literally, which is difficult because the populist can always say, we are the real Democrats, because we want the people to rule. And we are saying, we're liberal Democrats, we want checks and balances, we want a constitution. We want checks and balances not simply within the political system, but within the social system. So we have a market, and we have the media, and we have the political system, which are all also related to each other.
And then the populists will say, where are the people in your concepts of democracy?
Yeah. And I would say, maybe it's not so wise to use that word at all.
Democracy, demos.
No, people. People.
Stop using the word people.
Yeah,
okay.
Because the only conceivable or the only conception of democracy that I would wish for and defend is the notion of democracy of minorities, which respects minorities in this checks and balances system. Yeah. This is what Trump is against. This is what Orban is against. What Kaczynski in Poland is against. What Wilders and all the populists are against.
Yeah.
They all want to undermine that particular system.
Yeah. So the notion that a populist notion of democracy will lead to a dictatorship of the majority.
Yes, the translation is from the people is equal to the majority, is equal to the party that represents the majority, is equal to the leader that represents the party. This is also in the communist, configuration and translation from one to the other. So the people is a chimera, it's a myth, because Wilders and others are simply calling people whoever agrees with them.
Yes.
And whoever does not agree with them is
are not the people.
Is called elite.
Yes.
So I'm elite by definition 2 times.
Yes.
Sociologically, and because I disagree with Wilders.
Yes.
And
I think even more because I think we can find more ways in which you are an elite. Yes, than 2. Firoez.
I don't mind.
True. Let's get rid of the notion of the people, because it's a dangerous. It's different than the demos, actually.
Maybe.
Populist demos,
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe it's true.
One is Latin.
I was thinking that as a minority, I'm more majority than you are.
Good.
No, I don't know. I don't.
Oh,
No, he was talking about the minorities, and
You
I
think-
am part of the minority population.
in a sense.
Yeah, I'm not Dutch. I'm not born here, but as you described the minority, you are more minority than I am. And but no problem. You know, my problem is that I don't think in these terms.
No. In what terms do you think?
I mean, it's good. I listen to you and I say, yes, it is true. And you know, for me, is the difference between political system and politicians.
Yes.
Politic is daily life.
You say politics is daily life.
Politic is daily life.
Okay.
What do I eat? Who are my friends? Which movie I'm going to look at? And that those are choices. And that is based on your idea about your utopia, your own utopia, individual. And everything is politic. Education is politic. Growing up the children.
So give me, for those who do not understand what you mean, give me a small definition of politics.
Yeah, that the politic is the way of living we choose for as an individual, and then get together, and then we get a group, and then we're going to realize it. Political system is an instrument. It's an instrument we use to can communicate and interact with each other, which is nothing wrong with it. I mean, there is nothing wrong with the current political system. Politicians are changing all the time during the past 40 years. Politicians, in my opinion, they walk behind the reality of the society. You can see it at the television at this moment. But the fact is that the politicians think that they are chosen to decide for other people. That is their and
Mental
politicians think that the politic is a job.
Well, actually, and they are wrong in that, because tomorrow we will go to the voting booth, and I'm actually choosing a representative, right, in the parliament. But they're not supposed to do on my behalf make decisions.
Not in the ultimate level.
Okay.
The fact is that we used to do that maybe 40 years ago, to choose someone to do, because we trust that person and said this, he knows better than me, and it was very ideological. Nowadays is that as an individual, as a member of the people community, we are very diverse. We are not a group anymore. We have our own, and we want to participate. We want to share our ideas. We want to have enough room to talk with our representatives. And while the representatives monopolize the whole political systems and thinks that they are the chosen one, and they are going to act like that, then this gets a gap.
Okay. So you said it's not the politics is the choices we make in daily life that have consequences for society. Yes. That's politics for me. It's a notion of the personal is political. Hille Hinsberg. Then you say the political system is, of course, the rules in which we engage. There's nothing wrong with that. The problem, I hear you
are
say,
the politicians.
are the politicians that have an interpretation of what their tasks are in this democracy or representative democracy, exactly. which are actually invalid.
Exactly, and in that sense, I don't think so. In the way of my way of thinking, it make sense, or the people exist, either are not existing.
You say I don't need, for my analysis, I don't need that notion of people or not.
It's just that's.
But you see, this is exactly romanticism. If you describe politicians in this way,
you say you say he's a romantic.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
You're romanticizing.
I mean, neither of us want to have a kind of word fight about the people, or you know what it means. In the end, it's about all kinds of other things that we perhaps agree on. Mm-hmm. But I don't agree on the notion that politicians are bad in the sense that you describe them. We need politicians. They may be a little dangerous, but I think power is never in good hands. There's a nice quote from an old sociologist in the Netherlands. Mm-hmm. Power is never in good hands. But we need those people. We need experts. We need people who know better than us. And the problem of our society probably is that nobody these days is prepared anymore to acknowledge that there are situations in which people know better than you. Because everybody's in the right, everybody's always in the right. And this is exactly a kind of, let's say, knowledge populism, to think that the people are always right and don't need interpretation, don't need professional representation, etc. All these things. So we need politicians, but we know, of course, we know. That's why tomorrow we're going to choose other people than the people are presently in the government.
Maybe before, excuse me, he challenged me.
Of course.
And
It's
his fault. I mean, there's a couple of things. First thing is that if you call me a romanticus, thank you very much. That's a good compliment. And I hope that I get to stay like that, because the worst thing is being a pragmaticus. The second thing is that I didn't tell that politicians are bad people. I mean, that didn't I say? I said the problem is with the politicians and the way they think about their job and their function. If they just change their mind and think about that truly about what they are for and what they are doing, then I think that we have a lot of opportunity to do that. And the third thing is that the fact that I choose someone, it doesn't mean that I give my permission for my life for 4 years in the hand of that people. Whenever I say I need to talk with you, then my people who are elected by me must come to me and listen to me, and doesn't wait till that we have 2 months for the election and the campaign and everything.
Yes, I think we all agree on that. Yeah, we are not going back to the old rules of engagement that you make the choice once, and then the politician takes it and runs as far away as he or she can. Yeah, so I think we agree on that. But I'm not sure about, you're talking about persons who are making not the right choices, or they are not representing you correctly enough. Is that it?
No. Listen, I'll give you an example. All right. Maybe in that example, is it getting clear? I'm at my neighborhood. I'm starting some kind of Azarhoosh. What do we call it in English?
Refugee asylum seeking.
That is very small happening for 16 people who are living over there, and we have started as a bottom-up initiative from people. We are going to do that, and well, it's good. So we started to inform the neighbors, all right, and people who were agreed. They said, well, it's good, I like it, and they didn't show up. Only people who were against it, about 17 people, they came, and all the 17 were against the whole happening, all right? And their problem was, why come you to tell to us that is going to happen? We want to have a right to say yes or no. The politician starts to explain them, well, that is our responsibility. If I decide that there is something like this, then that is a fact. What we want to is to talk with you and ask you about your fears and your needs and everything, all right? In that case, you have a contradiction à terme. You ask them to come. They say, why didn't you ask us before? And they say, that's not your responsibility because I'm chosen. Yes. All right? And
you say in that sense they misinterpreted.
In that sense, is that interpretation of their own function is quite narrow.
Okay, I want to get to hear the perspective of Godelieve, who has actually been a politician. The only one at the table who dared to be a member of parliament.
Well, I want to take a few steps away from this and then come back to what we're discussing here, because I think a lot of the phenomena that we're discussing are phenomena that spring from something else.
Okay.
We're living in an increasingly complex, quick, swift society with a lot of interlinkages. We live in a society where very fundamental shifts are taking place, like shifts in the economy. Give one
Demography.
example,
Yeah.
work and labor. With all the new labor that is there might not be enough paid labor anymore for people to actually live on. We live with populations that are increasingly mixed, and we live with systems and structures that date back from 100 years ago, 200 years ago in their sort of foundational principles. So for me, and this I experienced very much when I was a parliamentarian already, there's a huge mismatch
Yes.
between a lot of our institutions that
Yes.
are there to sort of organize society and
The daily experience.
the daily experience of day-to-day life that is speeding up, that is getting quicker. There's all kinds of things happening that are somehow not captured by these institutions.
Yes.
So I'm actually with him in the sense that for me politics has always been where more than two people sit together and talk about how to improve a situation. That for me, that's where politics starts. So if we sit here and we say we have a problem in the neighborhood, we talk together.
Actually, what we're doing here is
This
politics.
This is politics. So before I became a formal parliamentarian, I was a doctor, I was a health person, I was working in the neighborhoods, I was doing all kinds of different things. For me, that was already politics.
Yes.
So when I transited into the parliament, for me that was extending something that I was already doing, and now in another institutional setting. Now I experienced with the energy that I had from my previous work to come into an institution like the Dutch parliament, that you see all kinds of constraints. You also see a lot of opportunities, because it's a wonderful job to have. But at the same time, you see a lot of constraints. And the constraints are to do with some of the things that you all point out. One of the constraints was that I felt that the political parties, and I'm talking now about the beginning of this century, so I was in parliament between 2001 and 2007. Already then, it was very clear that the political party structure had very little to do anymore with the socio-economic, socio-cultural mix of the people that's related to these parties. Some people did this from way back when, but a lot of other people said, well, I feel related to this, this, and this. And so the people, in that sense, very mixed what the people is. But these parties are there. They're Molochs from an older era, and they're sitting there, and we're struggling with them tomorrow. At the same time, all these processes, social, are going on, and democratically are going on. So for me, the discussion should, first of all, be acknowledging that this is taking place, that there is a mismatch between social, cultural, economic processes that are speeding up, that are also confrontational in many ways, and the structures that try to manage this. So if you can agree on that, then the next question is, well, are we going to be revolutionary or evolutionary? Is it...
Is that the next question for you?
Well,
Are
for
we
me it is, because
okay.
the revolutionary perspective would then
Okay.
be, we're getting so much trouble with these institutions now that, throw a bomb on them, let them disappear. I mean, in 2012 was organizing a party. Unfortunately, the cabinet fell before I could do it, but to have a big fireworks on the eve of New Year's Eve of 2012 to abolish all the political parties. So have
Really?
a big, there were 400 Dutch, so-called well-known Dutch people had already signed on. I had already a fireworks person in Rotterdam who was going to organize the fireworks import illegally from China. And it's going to be like a big thing on Dam Square. We're going to abolish the political parties to say, okay, to make a statement and say, guys, can we not shape up the
I
landscape?
think that's romantic. By
That's
the way.
romantic, very romantic. Of course, the cabinet fell just before that, so we
No
ended
illegal
up-
fireworks
no
at the
illegal
Dam Square.
fireworks. It was real,
Okay.
I was. But anyway, the point is serious.
Yes,
Are
of
you going to
course.
do that, or are you going to work evolutionary? Now,
Yeah.
I think in the Netherlands we tend to work evolutionary. So what we see is all kinds of what I call rear fights as the result of that.
Rear fights?
Rear fights,
ja.
achterhoedegevechten.
Rear fights.
So
Rearguard.
rearguard fights. So, for instance, discussions about, that we see now in connection with, are we going to call the wildest people populist, or instead of saying, okay, what is the social, cultural, socio-economic realities of people who now feel inclined to shift towards this or that corner of the political spectrum? And like you're doing, dig much more deeply into what's happening there, and then see, okay, can we create new forms and new shapes on the basis of it? And I feel there's much more energy. If you start to look that way, like what he is doing, which I really sympathize with,
Yes.
you also come into arenas where there's a lot of vital, creative possibility for the future.
Oh, but thank you so much.
So a lot of
no.
old
Godelieve, that's great, but the problem with I now have is great, but I don't want to go to the solutions yet. I want to understand what the real problem is. So
Now the problem is we work with old frames.
yes,
We work with
and what
old
is actually the
discussions
risk? Because
and old institutions, and a lot of it is just
sure, the question
End of
is
cell
what
divides.
is the risk of having this analysis? So there are old institutions which do not fit with where there's a mismatch. You use the word mismatch with day-to-day reality. So what is the risk of that in society?
we have a culture where everybody who has a cell phone now also is culturally primed to think they're an expert, they can photograph themselves, they're center of their own universe. And so this is the cultural universum we're living in.
Yes.
At the same time, we have representative democracies where somebody else is telling, and we hear complaints about it, where somebody else is saying, I represent you now. Most people, when you go, I'm a social media junkie, so I'm in all kinds of social media and I actually follow what's happening there. What I see there is a lot of people have their own areas of expertise, carve out their areas of expertise, or expand them because nobody's contradicting them.
Yes.
But a lot of it is also serious, that they have areas of expertise. And the institutions don't deal at all with that.
No, but that is the
reality.
analysis of the problem. We already created that analysis. The question is, what's the consequence of that analysis? What is the risk?
That we see all these kind of phony, and I can't use the word fake debate anymore, but all the phony discussions which don't capture that tension. They don't capture the underpinning processes that are, for a lot of people creating serious tensions. They don't capture the speeding up of things, which for a lot of people put pressures on them as individuals. And they don't capture the all kinds of initiatives that are ongoing that create the beginnings of new things.
And what is the risk of that?
I don't like it.
Okay.
No.
What do you don't like?
Well,
You don't like what?
I don't like the suggestion that this mismatch can ever be solved or finally there always be a mismatch in the sense that there always be a gap between at least the institutions and, well, let's call them the people or the individuals, for example in the Netherlands, all the people that live in the Netherlands.
Perhaps?
Citizens, okay, citizens.
That would help? Yeah.
So either, the question in terms of evolution versus revolution, maybe that's two extremes that I'm somewhere in the middle. But do you want to abolish the institutions? Do you want to abolish professionalism? Do you want to abolish expertise? Do you want to abolish science and everything?
No, I want to address
and the welfare state.
No, you immediately go to abolishing. What I'm saying is, I want to address that there is a mismatch.
Okay, that's sure.
Because
but
your
there will
statement,
ever
the
be
statement that you made like 5 minutes ago, saying that nobody expects, nobody respects professionalism or this or that anymore, it's not true. I mean, I'm a physician by training. Most people who go to a doctor still hope that this person has studied for a certain number of years.
And
So there is a certain level of respect. You expect that. If you go, you have a legal problem, you don't go to the quack at the corner, you basically go to somebody that you think, okay, this... So there is still a lot of trust in society.
Yeah.
If you go with certain emotional problems, you go to a friend or a neighbor. So if you look with that sort of umbrella, you're going to look at where are the trust structures. There's still a lot of trust also in our society.
Sure.
But there's distrust exactly at those spots where the mismatch takes place. So there's distrust in certain political institutions because people they see rightly that these institutions do not perform anymore.
Yes.
No.
So that
But
distrust is
they
justified.
do not solve the problems of day-to-day, of which they are actually...
The romantic thought behind this is
It's not
that
romantic.
we, of course, we need to change the institutions, and we're going to do that tomorrow in part, I think.
You think elections are a way to correct dysfunctional institutions?
One little way of.
Really?
Otherwise, you wouldn't think that people would go out to vote anyway.
Interesting.
So voting,
I think it's a habit.
voting is still
It's a habit.
one way of
Correcting dysfunctional institutions.
Correcting
Really?
dysfunctional institutions,
Okay.
correcting dysfunctional parties, etc. But it's just one way. But no,
Just to give you context, I was looking at the audience, and many people were like, "Really?" like that. So
No, let me make my
yeah,
point in the sharpest possible way. I think we need an elite. We are an elite. We shouldn't be afraid to call ourselves an elite. I mean, then you need to define, who we are. Are we intellectuals? Are we journalists? Or are we people interested in politics or whatever?
Or none of the above.
We need institutions. We need organizations. And as a sociologist, I would always say there's a flywheel beginning to turn from the very bottom up, where you begin to organize anything at all. And then you accumulate power, and then people come into power. And it's not a bad thing, because power has also positive effects. You can do things because you have power. But simultaneously, the flywheel begins to turn and turn and turn, and then power begins to accumulate, and you have professional politicians who do the things that you have described, who don't think they know anything about what goes on down there. But the problem is, it's almost a philosophical problem. We cannot get rid of institutions, we cannot get rid of organizations, of professionalism, of expertise. So we have to live with
Dick,
the trust.
nobody is saying
We have
that
to
we
live
want
with the trust and the distrust at the same time.
Sure, but nobody says we get rid of institutions. Mayfight is an institution. It is built up for a lot of vital energy.
And he has a lot of power.
Exactly.
I think that as well. Just also as a thought leader. Welcome, who are you?
Hi, my name is Mike.
Hi, Mike.
Hello.
Please.
I've got a question for you.
Dick,
Of
yes.
course, for Dick, sorry. We live in a meritocracy, of course.
No, not of course.
Well, fair enough.
We live in a meritocracy.
What kind of, would I immediately ask, what kind of
Okay,
meritocracy?
but before you answer my question with
I
a
won't.
question, yes, we live in a society where the elite is ruling the nation, the state. The problem, however, which I don't see addressed by you, is how can the elite answer anything for people who are not in power? Because when power grows within certain circles, they aren't in touch anymore. And
The risk of power?
the risk of power is
Okay.
detachment from society,
course.
and this is a common sense
Yeah, that's
problem,
what you
right?
already acknowledged, right? Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't see that answers,
Yeah.
and it's this institutional mismatch which I hear from you, which is exactly that. And
Yes.
what is your?
But I would begin to say that this is inevitable. So
It's not. It's
whoever-
acknowledged, but
But
it's
that's
you,
acknowledged.
that's
you need
blatant pragmatism.
You need to accumulate power. You need, for example, to do anything. You need to organize. You need to get together with other people with the same views in order to change anything. Also from the bottom up. But as soon as you begin to organize, the flywheel begins to turn, and then the danger also creeps in. And the danger is intrinsic, I would think. So you always need to think. Who am I? What is power doing to me? Even the power for the good. You know what I mean? The power for the
You make
good.
it too individual, because there are structures by which you can have it's like countervailing power or
Of course, else
capping
we
power.
would have never been
course.
outside of the ancient regime.
Exactly.
But with this system conservatism,
Yeah.
which is something which has never actually existed, that's also something like the people. It's a social construct. We don't live in the welfare state in which we lived in the 1960s anymore.
Exactly.
Society is evolutionary. The system is evolutionary. The idea that an election is the same now as it has been 50 years ago is just ignorant, and society wants to keep it that way, but it has been changed altogether.
Can we see something positive meanwhile in this discussion? And I think it's
Yes, please.
what you're talking about is that we are all in this big kind of learning curve. I think something good can come out of it.
Why would
That we
change be
acknowledge
bad?
this kind of changing power structures. That no, it's not only politics, it's not only elite who has the power.
No, but
It's dispersed.
you've completely
it's in
misunderstood.
different
If you thought,
nests in the
I was
society.
saying this, I began to say that I really think, and I've worked for this all my life in politics, to expand the representative system.
Diversify.
I've always criticized political parties, including GroenLinks, for the similar things that happen everywhere, and expand the idea of democracy beyond political parties to lots of things. So social movements, referenda, etc. Even now, I'm in favor of referenda if they're well organized.
Thank you. You also can continue. Yeah. Oh no. Okay. So much. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that's nice. I like that. Always spontaneous applause. I really like that. I mean, applaud people. So okay. So before you, because you get the floor. Before I give you the floor, because she hasn't. She wanted to say something and then somebody interrupted. And okay, but I was asked a question from the audience, from you actually. Can I just participate by standing there?
I'm from Brussels. I'm sorry. I'm used to like commission
Yeah.
conferences where everyone's seated.
But you don't have to
There's
worry.
a Q&A. And
Yes.
I just very
So there's no Q&A. You just participate whenever you want, and you just go to the table, and as soon as there's somebody at the table, I acknowledge that person, and we're going to integrate it into the conversation.
Okay, thank you.
Is that okay? So join us. Please, Hille, because you wanted to respond already.
Yeah, what about this kind of different types of nests, or let's say some kind of centers of power?
Yes.
I think we need
Polycentric.
Yeah, I think we need to acknowledge their existence and support them if we feel it's right way to do. I think it's already happening. It's just trying to create more enablers, trying to facilitate more of this kind of local power coming up and doing something, influencing.
But that's of course happening, right? I mean, that is the answer of the, I would say, mismatch in your. I would agree with your analysis of a mismatch between the institutional framework, the way we have organized democracy in this society, and the way people actually are functioning in daily life. Isn't that also what you are saying?
Sure,
And the question
sure.
is, aren't people already doing that in these polycentric or in these, what was your term, nests? I really like
Democracy nests, power nests.
Democratic nests all over. And then the Mayfart, of course, is an example, I would say.
Yes, I completely I agreed with you, and
Yeah.
I'm totally not agreed with you about the role of the elite and that it always have a gap and everything. From dialectic point of view, the society as a dialectic organ is always some point of this and that, and every time is a conflict between the appearances. Of course, that is true. But the fact is that to think that the society needs an elite, to think about that, means that you are going to organize it. I'd like a society in which that the elites is fluid. It means that the elite changes every time if there is needed for
One
other
day you're
elites.
not, and the other day you
And
are.
the way of the thinking that we keep the constructs as it is, and you said what are the consequences of this
Yes,
analyze?
exactly.
The consequence is Donald Trump.
Yeah.
The consequence
Yeah, of
is
course.
Wilders. The consequence is Le Pen. It's the fact that the people they are not believing in them, but they are not believing more in you. Not that they think that they are good, but they don't trust, not at all, that the establishment who wants to keep himself as an establishment. And if that's the situation now, let's change it, man.
That is exactly. Thank you so much for kicking that ball into the goal. There was, of course, the question behind the question. Yes.
Yes, I guess another romanticus at the...
Oh, that's so great.
I know him.
What's your name?
Peter,
Hi, Peter.
and I'm inspired by Native and how they organize society. And my question to Dick would be that I don't have any problems with elite, but I have problems with elite that do not serve to or are facilitating the way people like to discuss how they would organize their surroundings, but they use their power to keep structures as they are. For instance,
And to keep themselves in place, right?
and themselves in place, and
Yes.
so on. And for instance, TTIP, I don't feel represented by the
European Parliament or national parliaments.
and anyhow, in discussions, I heard that from the 500.
Let's check how culturally aware everybody is, politically aware. TTIP, everybody's okay, right?
TTIP.
Yeah, so that's the Transatlantic Trade Agreement, okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I heard that
Just
from
checking.
the 526 gatherings, there were 500 where industrials were represented by lobbyists,
Yes.
and 6 with with NGOs and so on.
Yeah, in the
and
European
few.
Parliament there were 500
Yeah.
lobbyists
Yeah.
for the
Yeah.
for the yeah.
So, and to keep it in a visual,
Compact.
yeah, in a visual structure.
Okay.
Politics is about verticalism, so it is in pillars, it is top down, it is the goal is to gain power, whereas in native societies they are horizontal. So when we are horizontal, then there is transparency. You used the word already.
Yes.
There it is about cooperation, and it is about discussing how would we like to see society.
Ah, thank you.
And
Let's get a reaction for Dick, right? I mean,
yeah, I see.
so the notion of horizontal power sharing instead of organizing it vertically. So the notion of a necessary elite out of the equation.
Well, I think if you subscribe to the idea of liberal democracy, it comes down to organizing checks and balances.
Okay.
Not so much the power of the people, because I think that's a dangerous notion.
Yeah.
And I speak from experience because I was a lefty in the 60s and 70s, and I believed in it for the left, and people still do in some quarters. I think that's...
You look at me?
No. And so we have checks and balances, which is the most important thing. But you shouldn't only organize this on the horizontal level, but also on the vertically. So I'm perhaps squarely against what Peter has just suggested. That is the best way of people to organize. Just keep it horizontal.
Why?
You
Why?
cannot organize
Why?
anything by remaining horizontal.
Why?
Because you cannot build institutions. You cannot build organizations. You cannot build a welfare state, for example, or you cannot even build a children's care home without institutionalizing something and professionalizing
And you say
something. So you
institution-
need this
check.
democracy is not about giving power to the people
Yeah.
in whatever sense of the word, but organizing the interaction between, in Dutch that I would call that wisselwerkingsdemocratie, though, the interaction between the people who represent us, and we need representation. That's the first thing I would say. We need representation. First of all, because not everybody is interested in politics. Not everybody has the time. Because people are busy, running around, running markets and other institutions, and don't want to get into politics. Also because it's such a dirty job. So we need those people. We need representatives, and we need to organize the interaction between the people who has chosen these representatives and the representatives who are there as professionals and do a certain kind of job, which they may do badly, of course, and then we can criticize them. And the deepening of democracy, I would think, is not giving power to the people, but deepening the interaction and multiplying the institutions and the procedures and the mechanisms which can intensify this interaction between these two. There are two parties in politics, and they need to interact. You need to keep this interaction going.
Yeah.
If you don't, you either get populism or you get Hitler.
Okay. I think I'm understanding it, but so you say we do not. If you think of institutions, they are never horizontally organized.
No.
There's always a vertical part of it because you delegate part of your power to somebody who's on your behalf making decisions.
Even if institutions look like this,
Yes.
and not like this.
Yes, of course.
So
But
this
there's
would- this would
never.
be-
They are
This
never
would be
horizontal.
fascism. Let's say it would be fascism. A flat society would be populism,
Okay.
and we
Okay.
sit in the middle, in between, somewhere in between.
Yes, hello.
Hi.
So I'm Elisa, and I work in the field of digital democracy in a European organization in Brussels. So I think I'm starting to understand what Mr. Pels is trying to say, but in the beginning I was quite perplexed because the way in which you seem to interpret democracy was more like direct democracy. Well, I think that there are different nuances of democracy, and we have chosen to have a representative democracy for a reason. And political parties, like in Italy, fighting for direct democracy, for example, the Five-Star Movement, for me are conceptually wrong, because it wouldn't be possible in a society with such demographics to have direct democracy, but it is representative democracy for a reason. But what if there is a middle way between the two? Because from what we see today is that the citizens are not happy about traditional politics anymore and traditional political parties, how they are made. And I recently read also, one example is a very interesting book called Against Elections by David van Rijbroek.
He was actually talking about that.
Yeah, in which it is a middle way because he announces this possibility of sortition, where there's a people's assembly going parallel with representatives of our society, in which it could be a possibility in order to...
Did you like the idea of a lottery?
Yeah, I think that... I don't think everyone in democracy wants to participate. Some people don't have time, some people are not interested. We'll never have everyone participating in a democracy. But what if the tools are lacking at the moment for those who actually want to be part of it? Because I think that is the huge frustration at the moment, that the people who want to be part of it can't be part of it.
That was what we tried to do, and I agree with you. There will always be, and I would say quite a big share of each society that will only be consumers of democracy. They will not be facilitators, participants, and doing some kind of influence on the policies, the way that the society is built up.
And just one last thing, I think that it should be top-down, because I think that
What should be top-down?
the factor of how our democracy should be, because I do think that we need institutions to basically set the framework. But what is happening now at the moment is that, for example, the EU institutions are afraid of the people. And we have a desperate need to understand the people, because I personally, in my Euro bubble, did not anticipate Brexit. And it is important to get those points of view, because these professionals, as you call them, have a completely different point of view of what people are voting.
So you actually agree with the idea, the notion of the mismatch between those there and okay.
I think they don't have to be afraid. They have to
and
open
then
up to tools to gather these...
I try to understand what you mean with top-down, because I don't understand that.
It's institutions. I think that it can't be just a mass of
Okay,
chaotic
so-
people deciding
Thanks.
how our democracy should be, because that would be chaos. But I do think that institutions should open up
So
to
it's
the
the
people.
structure. It doesn't have to be top-down. It doesn't have to be initiated by the ones currently in power. But it can, and probably it's best to be initiated by someone taking the responsibility.
Yeah, and that doesn't have to be the one who's currently in the
No,
institution, right?
I found it very interesting.
Yeah.
You said it's
Estonia.
one person
Yeah, of course.
who managed to turn this into a movement. So
Was the trigger, the
as a
whistleblower.
trigger,
Yeah.
maybe also maybe the right person in the right place. Who knows? Media influence, maybe also. Like in the case of Van Rijbroek, of course, he's a celebrity author. It's very important to have a celebrity author. Otherwise, G1000 wouldn't have existed.
No, but it was also the context, of course, because everybody who wrote the book, there was a problem in Belgium at the moment. I mean, the government wasn't formatted in I think
More than
almost a year.
More than a year.
More than a year, and he thought, well, can we as the people do it smarter than those out there who are trying to create a government? So let's get a group
And
of people together.
It turned out not
Yes.
to be, at
Exactly.
that very same moment, not to have the
Just to have a
solutions.
context. Thank you for doing that, Eliza. Eliza Lironi, I think. Huh?
Yeah.
Yes, because you are one of the EU crowd partners, actually, and also introducing actually the next round of this debate, because this discussion. Because join me. Don't worry, because now we're going to go from the analysis of what's going wrong in current democracy and this mismatch to what are solutions actually to trying to create ways of, let's say, meaningful participation.
Something in between
Exactly.
total chaos and
Exactly.
absolutely
Exactly.
vertical.
So, but let's see if we have everything on the table for the problem and an analysis, or we should have something else on in our mind.
Well, I'm sorry to disappoint you. I wanted to name one of the problems, but actually
Yes.
one of the advantages of what Dick has been telling us about elites and about elected structures and representatives. I'll lay my cards on the table. I'm British. I've lived in the Netherlands for 23 years. Yes, I do speak Dutch. And 9 months ago, I feel, I'm going to say it very black and white, that my rights were voted away
Yes.
by a little bit more than half the population of Britain. Well, half the population of an incorrectly identified demos.
Mm-hmm.
I'll be really controversial. I don't
Very
see
true,
last year's vote as democratic.
Can you explain why?
And
what
I'm
you-
very
what you
angry
mean?
about it. Well, a lot of the people who are affected by it, people who've been expatriates for more than 15 years living in Europe, were excluded from the vote.
Yes.
A lot of EU citizens living in Britain were excluded from the vote.
Yeah. So
And
to
those are the people who are most affected
Yeah.
by this decision. But I don't want to have a long point about the EU. We could discuss that all night.
Yeah.
What I think, though,
What's your name? I missed it.
Michael.
Hi, Michael.
Michael.
Yes, I like.
Yeah. What has happened? A decision of massive constitutional consequence and consequence for people's lives has been handed over to supposedly the people, which is actually 60 million different individuals, and now is presented as the will of the people in slightly fascist terms, I think. I would rather that this decision was taken by professional politicians who are effectively, in a way,
Yeah.
it's not a nice thing to say, sort of paid to be disliked. You've been a politician.
Yeah.
And you've been a politician,
He
Dick. I know.
really agrees
No.
with you.
We pay
I
you
agree.
to take decisions,
Yes.
and sometimes we'll, if I really like your decision, I'll sort of live with it. I'm sure it's an ungrateful task. But sometimes you'll do something that really makes me angry. So I get angry. And then 5 years later, I get to vote again. And I get a really good feeling because I get to vote for him instead of you.
Okay. So the point
Now,
is,
I
please.
would rather that,
Yeah.
because what you have now is half the population
Yes.
very, very angry at another half of the population, literally
Yes.
families that don't talk to each other.
Yes.
We
Okay.
need this lightning rod to take that out of the
But
debate.
we all would like to have something in between.
Somebody
these-
wanted to applaud
These
this
5 years.
analysis.
I don't want to.
Compromise,
I want to
yeah.
wait 5 years in order to get to the next election.
Okay, so but this is like a very good case or argument against the referendum.
Just one
Yeah.
concrete specific method
Yes,
that was
of course.
done improperly,
Yes.
probably, as you said
Yes.
yourself. So
No, but can I come
Yeah.
in here?
nothing
please.
to be discussed.
I understand your anger. I have a sister who just got married
I'm
for
not
the
angry
same.
at anyone here.
She had to get married because she had to do something
She lives
at
in
the
the
Brexit.
UK.
Oh, okay, yeah. Against all her principles, she had
Against
to
all
get
her
married.
principles, she had to get married. Yeah. No, but now I'm off my point. The problem I think that you're sketching is not so much the referendum, is not so much the fact that 51% of the people vote for something and that should be taken seriously. But the problem is that now the 49% is silenced
Yeah.
by the winning. And I think that is the
Yes.
problem. That was what you're
Yeah.
pointing at, and there's people like Jeffrey Nice in your country who have actually expanded extensively on this. So if a democracy becomes something that silences
The minority.
the minority, then we're in trouble.
Yeah.
So I think that is what should be addressed. Not so much the fact that all these things happened is very unfortunate, but people might say, okay, you guys, the 49%, have been saying things to us about migration, etc., that we did not expect, and we had to swallow that for, etc., etc. But that people are now being silenced because the people, that
Yeah,
homogeneous, monolithic concept is being evoked. and now all of a sudden the people have spoken. I think that is what irritates people. Of course, you can still be very much against, for all kinds of reasons, against the result of that referendum.
But that would also be like an example then of an institutional failure, right? I mean, it's organized in the wrong way.
I wanted to make. I mean, I'm looking at the way your parliament, your elected people are handling this.
Well,
And you say, okay, you know, if you put all your trust there, I don't think it will take you very far, or get you very far. So that is also not the solution. I think the solution is to have a much deeper discussion about how come that 51%, whether it's about Brexit, about any other topic, silences 49%.
Yeah.
Yes.
That is
Very
that is the
important.
fundamental
And that's why I feel we do need, you know, elites, which can also be shifting elites, as we've heard. But we do need elites who are elected because
But then there's the
those
same discussion,
people-
right? And then there's the same discussion whether it's done in a referendum, the decision, or in a representative way.
there is.
You should always have
but
the
I
discussion.
think they can facilitate. I think if they take their responsibility, which I feel British parliamentarians on both sides of this debate have not done.
Exactly.
I think if they
that's an
take their
against-
That's the
responsibility,
fault,
they can facilitate civilized discussion, which eventually ends in some
So-
kind of compromise we can all live
So
with.
it's also a moral issue. It's not
Exactly.
simply that institutions do not work, because you
Exactly.
could then compare the Netherlands, and we would be very happy having a system of proportional representation. And then the UK having a majoritarian system, which engenders these kinds of things. The risk is much greater for these kinds of things to happen in a majority system than in our system. But secondly, it's a matter of the cowardice of politicians. It's about failure of leadership,
No, it's also a notion
moral
of
failure.
No, but it's also a notion of democracy. So the idea that 51% is a legitimate decision for which has consequences for the other 49%, and there is not, as you said, as you really well put really well. I mean, that is of course the fundamental thing. How do you deal with that? Democracy is not the dictatorship of the majority.
Exactly. I don't want to go on
that
too
is-
long because there are other people here,
of course.
but I'll just pose the question. What is the role of a majority? I don't believe the majority
No.
exists, but
One
what is the role of a majority
Yes.
in a democracy?
Exactly.
I'll just
Yeah.
leave you
That's
with the
the
question.
Thank you.
But I think for a long time, and people on the Wilders side or on the UKIP side in the UK will say that for a long time they have felt they were on the minority
Yes, of
side,
course.
and they have had to swallow arguments that they did not agree with, and were also not properly heard. And so I think if we want to get beyond all this, I think we need to start discussing how do we deal with diversity, basically, and minorities of all kinds.
If you want to continue this conversation on this, or can we involve somebody else now? The topic. Yes, thank you so much.
Okay. I approach this whole situation from the personal experience. I have been, I must say, I have never chose for any system. I was born in a sort of democratic system. It's being called democracy.
It's called the Netherlands.
No, I'm talking, it doesn't matter where I was born.
Okay.
It doesn't matter where I was born. I was born in a system. I didn't choose for the system. That's number one. So when somebody says, well, we chose for a system, I've never chose for a system. That's number one. But I did experience the whips of reality. Can I stay in this house? Can I pay for my rent? Can I pay for my food? Is the quality of the food okay for my health? And all of you have these kind of experiences, and all of you are very desperate about what should I do, for whom I'm going to vote tomorrow, for instance. But and then I realized through the years that we idealized the idea of what democracy is. I grew up with the idea that democracy is a magnificent, wonderful idea, and we should embrace it, and we should fight for it, and we should die for it. But slowly, I realized that democracy actually, there are many different kinds of democracy. You have the representative democracy, you have deliberative democracy, you have direct democracy, and so on. And then I tried to understand where I, as a simple person with a little income, with very little influence in society, will feel a little bit more comfortable being a human being. And then I started studying and realized, well, democracy, where it was born? Democracy was born somewhere far away in Greece, when the heads of stammen, hoe zeg je dat in het English?
Tribes.
Of tribes, for various reasons, were not capable anymore on being the head of their tribe, and they were forced to work together. So the patriarchs were forced to come together and to deal with decisions, mainly because of war. Then what I discover is what the core of the problem today for us is how we deal with our values. I think that our biggest problem is a problem of values. And I see the problem of values in the specific case of the Netherlands, but I think it's more or less everywhere where the Western world is present, and I mean in the big cities in Africa and Asia, in Latin America, those are also Western cultures. Is the confrontation, the conflict, the unbridgeable conflict between the humanistic, Christian motivated values of love and caring and empathy from one side, and what Balkenende not long ago, when he was Prime Minister in the Netherlands, said we should embrace the Firoez. I don't know if everybody knows what this. So
East Indies Company.
Colonial power.
It's not only the colonial power, but all what it comes with it.
Yes, trade.
Rapacious and murderous and rapist ideals. So and this is what is represented at this moment by the neoliberalism. Neoliberalism represents that. It expands everywhere. Okay. Everybody somehow in this room believes and wants to enjoy the fruits of those values, but at the same time, we want empathy. At the same time, we want to care for our grandmother.
And you said that's not possible.
And I am asking you, is it possible to bring them together?
And I'm asking you, is it possible?
I am afraid it's not possible. And I think that's our main issue. And that's something about corruption.
Yes.
So corruption is not only an issue for the people on high posts,
but everywhere.
It's for everybody.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Well, I would say, I mean, you are here a lot in this beautiful house of civic education, right? And you teach me a lot. Thank you so much. I mean, in that sense, you said, what can I do in my small life? But you influence all these people here with your thoughts. Thank you so much for that. Do you want to respond to it, or do you say?
I'm completely agree with that. But I was just thinking about how come that I can't say nothing. I'm finished in my words. And I think that, I'm a political engaged person.
Yes.
And I've been politically engaged
your entire life.
In my mother's stomach.
Yes.
And but how come that I can't join really this discussion? And I thought the following thing is that back to the daily life. How come that if I talk to a guy who votes for Wilders, and we sit together and talk for half an hour, 1 hour, and after 1 hour we have a lot of things in common.
Yes.
And then we are agreed about a lot of things, and then we have some the differences. But if I look at our representatives at the television or in the radio, everything, it is like that. It is impossible to grow together and having the same thing in common. Okay, then my conclusion is that the whole system is meant to provide a discussion in the society. It is continue. It's not, with all respect, one event like G1000 or what is happening. It is a continuousness. It's an attitude of thinking, is a way of living, and the way of living, we just lost it, or we have never had it, I don't know, but we have to work on it, and that means that we have to emphasize and we have to invest in it, to create that. And what I think that it will possible is that the politician must learn from the citizens
Yes.
that if can they solve their problems, regardless of their political ideas, at one street and about one square, how come that they can't talk normal to each other in this city about the big problems of the city? And that is not the problem of democracy, that is not the problem of the institution, that is not a
That's the
top-down
problem of
or
the politician.
bottom up. It is the attitude of the politician,
Okay,
because
so thank
last
you.
one,
No.
and then I answer, is politics is not a job. So you can't be a professional politician.
Okay, but yeah, it's of course
Yeah.
addressed to you. So that's your vision. But let's now. I mean, I already like quarter of an hour ago I said let's go to the next phase of this discussion, and I would like to say so. Let's focus on strategies that enable the citizens, the notion of the people or the demos, to take up a different position in the democratic process. As you said, can these politicians not learn from what we in daily life do with all these people from different backgrounds, different political ideologies? We can still solve the problem on the square. Then we should also be able to solve other problems, right? But how can we make participation become truly inclusive, participatory? Can we? I mean, you did that with, of course, that's why you were on the table. In Estonia with your process. What did you learn from it? What can you share with us? What are key elements? We love in this series, we love the notion of design principles. So what kind of principles should design of these processes have to make it truly inclusive and participatory?
Before answering that, from my perspective, that as a hindsight, we kind of learned.
Yes.
I'm sure almost everyone here is part of some kind of community, maybe housing community, maybe an NGO, maybe in school, maybe in academy. You're all trying to make an influence and being part of something. And God knows it's not easy. You still need some kind of design for the process of reaching some kind of success, some results, some agreements, some decisions, some budgeting resolution, whatever. So what do you do? What do you do? Think back on the successes that you've had in your life when you have really taken the lead or being the facilitator and achieving some kind in common.
Of common goal.
Yeah.
Yes.
And then just project this success story to a larger process. That's it.
Okay, thank you so much for this open question to the audience.
Yeah.
Let's see if we can now use crowdsourcing now in this audience for creating a list of design principles for successful participatory democratic processes. So I'm going to ask you now to just shout a principle. What you said, think back of where you were part of a community trying to reach a common goal. And it's everywhere in daily life, of course. So who wants to be the first who names a design principle for a successful participatory process?
Consensus.
Consensus. You say the principle should be consensus. Okay.
It's also
Trust building. Thank you. This is really working out now. Consensus, trust building.
information.
Information, the correct information, the shared information. Okay. Openness. The right for everybody to participate, you mean? I don't know who said open. Thank you. Open.
Transparency.
Transparent. You should know what's happening. Thank you so much.
Tolerance.
Tolerance. What do you mean with tolerance?
Yeah, like tolerance of diversity.
Yeah, tolerance of the opinions of others, which you perhaps disagree with. Thank you. Diversity, yes.
Acknowledgement.
Of what? Acknowledgement.
Before the tolerance even starts.
Acknowledge that people think different, and that is okay in their own right. Yes.
Experience is really important.
Experience. Just doing it.
Now, if we look at the diversity of the people, which we wouldn't say anymore, but now we're saying it,
Yeah.
I think actually a little problem that we did.
I'm gonna, and now you talk so much, I have to give the mic to you because otherwise shouting out terms is possible, but if people, yeah, it's fine, it's fine.
I think one of the little problems that we didn't really discuss yet, but which made me say experience, is the fact that elite what we are talking about, we think that that's a big group, but it's actually a small group. And what I think is happening in society is that it's sort of the biggest group, which is often left out, is actually acting like a baby or a child that isn't being seen. And what is a child doing if nobody is paying attention? It's putting their feet on the ground, it starts screaming, it's doing stuff that is fully against what is logical, just to get that attention. And what I think is important, and that's what I was talking about experience, is what we see is happening in marketing and consumer insight and stuff is we look at specific target groups. For example, youngsters are a really hard group to reach. So there are a lot of researchers, how can we speak in the language of those target groups to make them understand? So why don't we do it with political stuff and really difficult subjects as well? And that's what I mean with experience. So just don't talk about it only, make it sort of an experience economy thing. Let them feel like future probing, like scenario planning. Show what that would mean. What would be the consequences of a specific choice you could make for your future?
I mean, political processes are really very, very talkative. I mean, we use words. We don't use the notion of experience, just doing it, feeling what's happening. If we talk about, thank you. Now I understand. Yeah, shouting out once.
I don't know how to put it in one word, but
Principal?
differentiation of policy areas.
Differentiation of policy areas.
Yeah, I'm a guy from a city. I live in Amsterdam. I used to live in Birmingham, which is a city that's 4 times bigger. I don't really want to. If I vote for a party, they might have great policies in my experience, but a farmer might think they're dreadful. Or
so you say I want to have different voting mechanism. For every subject I want to have a different vote.
Well, you can't really do it for 100 different subjects, but maybe for a number of different areas we need. Is it voting or is it participation?
Civic education.
Education, yes. Okay. So we now have Dick and Godelieve have taken notes.
There is one last
Oh
thing
yes.
I think which is very important is, and I forgot the word in any language right now, black hat, is accepting that people are fallible, accepting that the other person might make a mistake, and not trying to cut his head just because a human being.
Valuable. I mean, the human condition, actually, right?
Yeah, I just don't remember the word.
We make mistakes, yes, and not. I mean, immediately making victims or blaming people that they make mistakes. So we have these. What? Equal voting. Well, thank you, Joachim, who is actually making this program, which really happened. You actually co-created quite interesting. I mean, I studied political science, and one of the big names in theories of democracy is Robert Dahl, Democracy and Its Critics. It actually made me also, in my head, a true Democrat. When I read that book, it really helped. And he created 5 principles. And we actually co-created them now ourselves with our, I would say, expert experience, in the sense that experienced wisdom, effective participation, enlightened understanding, control of the agenda, inclusion. Thank you, Joachim. Equal voting. So also the process of actually deciding what to do. That's part of the Robert Dahl 5 criteria for democratic processes. What you were
Sounds
actually
very nice.
You were actually
I missed some words.
Yeah, what did you miss?
Stubbornness.
Yes, an attitude.
Stamina.
Yeah.
Leadership.
Very good.
Maybe setting the agenda or being sure about the agenda and the actual target.
Yes.
is behind these words, because if you don't know what you are,
Goal-oriented, you mean?
what you are trying to achieve, then this will be a chaos.
Very good. Be clear on the goal, but also have the stamina, the attitude to actually reach that point where you want to go.
Being cognizant, being tolerant, being recognizing all the diversity that you were talking about.
Yes.
Yeah.
Godelieve, what did you miss?
Well, I had the same as sort of in my head. It was Ausdauer.
Very
so
good.
it's similar,
Yeah.
but also loyalty, because
Ah.
you know what you now see in many initiatives, they come and go. They're too quick to actually stick, and that is a pity sometimes, because you see a lot of vital energy pops up, it goes away,
Yes.
and the old forces continue.
Yeah.
So if you want really also to create something new that is sustainable, I think it's very important to have a commitment and a loyalty, and have a serious engagement, because you can do it as a game. Say, okay, let people experience, beautiful little experiments, but
Make
I've
it
learned-
sustainable. Or
For instance, my own sense of what a parliament is has deepened that I could never have experienced outside the parliament by
Exactly.
being in it,
of course.
and knowing how it works and how these things function, the complexity of it. And so I think there should be much more inclusion in that sort of experience. So, but anyway, we can talk about
Interesting. So if we can so easily together go create that list of design principles, right? Then you would say, okay, so let's do it. Is that the case? Are we actually doing it?
Well, it is being done. See, what I find problematic, but also not so problematic in our time, is that if you take off the spectacles of looking in old frames and old ways of looking at the world, and you put new spectacles and say, okay, let's go and look for the places where trust is being built.
Yes.
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
You know, if you walk through the cities or the places where we live, and you see all kinds of initiatives that are now popping up and that are not ephemeral, and where trust is being built. A lot of these people do not call themselves political. They're not but in my definition of the politics, they're in politics because
of course.
they're building social tissue. If you look at correct information, this is fantastic. In the chaos of fake news and good news, there's actually a lot of very good and solid analysis going on. So if you take the spectacles up and say, okay, let's look for information out there. I mean, I'm of the generation of the stencil machine. Some of you
Nobody
might
even know what that is.
know what that is anymore.
No.
Before
It's
the
beyond the
telephone,
photocopier.
before the mobile, before the internet.
Before.
So if you see, having all the dangers and the stuff that we're now talking about, but basically what is accessible from behind your desk,
Yes.
it's absolutely fab. Openness.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, there's a lot of closeness, but because of the fact that we have a lot of more information at our disposal and people who are like watchdogs going for it, you can actually create a lot of openness, and there are people doing it. So I've actually, once I left the parliament, I've become much more like...
An activist, actually.
Well, I was an activist before, but a sort of new empiricist.
Oh, yeah.
Go and look where the places are, where these things are already happening.
Nests.
The nests.
Very good.
And so if you do that, then
So and then you're very optimistic.
I'm an optimistic person.
So you're both part of. I don't want this is a quarter of an hour, and I don't want to miss that question because a lot of people here are from the EU, right? I mean, and if you want to talk about also the digital strategies which are there, please join us, which can help, of course. I mean, you use digital technologies to actually.
But
It's
it's not the most important thing.
Okay.
I think what we have been talking about is far, far more
Okay.
important
Thank
than
you.
any kind of
Perfect.
channel that you
Yes.
can use.
Perfect. Because I want to ask you about DM25. What is that? What is that? Is that a new hope in these?
Ask me about something else.
No.
I mean, DM25 is one, but there are many, many movements
Yes.
currently popping up.
Yes, it's
to
just one
say,
example.
Let's democratize Europe in new ways. I'm the chair of the oldest Europe club in the country. It's called the European Movement
Yes.
International. Basically, this was an organization that was founded as federalist in the 1947-48.
Yes.
So people coming out of the war saying we should prevent this from happening again.
Yeah.
And these people were activists at the time. They're now old hacks, but basically at the time they were activists.
Yeah, really.
And so it's absolutely fantastic to see their energy and now see what is happening. But so you have DM25, you have the European movement, you have European Alternative, you have Eurocities, you have you have 26
Too much.
million, you have So about 3 weeks ago, before Mr. Varoufakis launched the DM in Paradiso, we in the afternoon gathered all these people. It was an absolutely fab afternoon because basically there are all these people who are already doing it. And so yes, and then people move to Paradiso, and so in the evening Mr. Varoufakis comes in, and you know, I like the DM agenda, but I have a problem with some of the DM organization. I mean, I'm a member of DM, so I can say that. As a member you can speak. But there's a bit of a politburo, there's a bit of too much sainthood around Mr. Varoufakis. But, you know, I think the agenda is pretty okay, and we should all go for that sort of agenda. I think it's fine.
Okay. We were just talking about principles.
Yes.
So I think it might be something that is sort of going in odd ways, listening to you in there. So the principles, why I said that digital or any kind of channels is of secondary importance. These principles that you adhere to in setting up, in designing any kind of processes are the key. So if they are missing this, that's what I heard from you, that it's slightly off the mark.
No, what you see, and this is why I asked initially with your movement, what you often see when movements start is some people have the Ausdauer, the energy, etc. And before you know it, they become the politburo. And that is my
They're
fear.
deciding everything.
And with Varoufakis' movement, I appreciated Varoufakis already way before he became a knowledgeable world citizen, because you know he was an economist before that, wrote on globalization, which interests me very much. I thought he wrote interesting things. And then, of course, I started to love the man when he was in the Eurogroup and he started to publish all the minutes of the Eurogroup. I mean, I was in the Dutch Parliament, the chair of the European Affairs Committee, and I always thought it was totally ridiculous that we did not get these minutes as citizens. So when Varoufakis just started to publish them online, I applauded the man. I thought this is absolutely fab. So he has a lot of credit with me on behalf of that. But now he's organizing a movement saying we have to make the institutions more transparent. It requires quite a lot of, you know, really rolling up your sleeves. And it's not just going around like a saint giving lectures here and there. It is basically a lot of hard
why I
work.
was asking, of course, because if we adhere to these principles, then somehow some of these organizations like DM is actually contradicting these principles we now co-created. In some
No, I mean the people who are forming DM, because it's a movement of 40,000 people who have registered, so I mean, all over Europe. These people are okay, but what the question then becomes, if you have such a wide network, how are you going to organize it and avoid it becoming a vertical system?
Well, that is maybe I can give you some experience, personal experience. There is a big difference between power and influence. What we try to do in the community is that we are not going to formalize the power. So there is not juridical form for our communities. Those are just networks. And
there's no boss. There's no
governmental
structure.
There is no chairman. There is the community is very fluid, and there are a couple of hundreds, and also with our international contacts, it's like that. No boards, nothing. But then you get the problem of decision making and the programming and what we are going to do. You need some kind of basic organization, and by having people who have influence, then you can organize that. And then is the question how you get the influence, and the influence is some kind of self-regulating, filtering mechanism of a fluid network. Like if you are not liable enough, and if you are abusing your power, or you are going to not being inclusive, other people doesn't accept you as an influenced person. So it's an automatism. And in this way is that exactly the same situation that I told about the politicians. There's nothing wrong with the instruments. The way you are acting is a problem. And yes, I think that we are right now just writing history. We are in the eye of the
we? Who's the we?
We is that let's say the activists at the
active
civil society, active citizen. We are writing the history. And nobody knows how big that is going to be. I believe, in fact, and I'm completely optimist, that the current system is going to be changed. That current attitude is going to be changed. I'm not sure which way we are going, but it's going to be changed. But the only problem is that now, if we say that politics is a daily life and is a common section between people and trying to have ownership. It was a good it was a word that I didn't hear. Creating a common ownership about the subjects and everything. Then at that moment we need investment from the establishment, the political parties, the government, to put their own attention in that movement and not trying to regulate that, to understand that, to analyze that, and to deal with it. And if that is that's my advice to politicians, is that now, like, that's the future, you are the past.
But there's two small problems I have. We can talk a whole night about this, but there's two
No,
small
we
problems.
can't now.
No, two small problems. One is, even in horizontal, so-called leaderless communities,
There are informal leaders.
yeah, they're informal, but they're also power games, and
Yeah,
you know,
of course.
power games are always there, and so some
Yeah,
people.
Pakhuis, you have to say yes. It's true. There are always
Some
power
people
games.
can impose themselves because they're more articulate, whatever. So
Yeah.
to guard this openness and inclusiveness, I think is very hard work, and in all kinds of organizations, even however small. Secondly, when you go to a certain scale, I mean, you can organize things in a neighborhood that is already complicated sometimes. The moment it goes to 40,000 DM members all over Europe, you have
Yeah,
a sort of
and
different. So what do you do then? And I
difference,
think
yeah.
that is what
Yeah.
these organizations are struggling with. At
Yes.
local level, they
The
can
principles
manage.
can be the same, but the
Principles
way
are
these
beautiful.
principles
Local,
are,
it might
of
still
course.
be manageable. The moment you get a pan-European thing that wants to conquer the European Parliament, it becomes a different animal.
It's maybe what Socrates was thinking about, Athens or a small polis, a small city.
Yeah, is there
small
a
square. You
maximum
can
scale?
assemble. There's a maximum scale, and the modern liberal democracy, representative democracy, has developed in order to answer to that problem of scale. Now, can I just say one sentence? Sorry, about yes, about Deem 25, because I became involved with it, and I'm organizing something called the Citizens University, which is a very small, insignificant thing. But I like Deem 25, first of all, because there are people from all over the world when I'm in meetings, because it's international. So there's a couple of Dutchmen, but the people from Spain and people from Bulgaria, etc. And that's nice. But also because it's radical, and Varoufakis is a radical. He's a bit too radical for my taste.
He's a social democrat.
But because he's radical enough against neoliberalism and against European Brussels-made neoliberalism, and that's good. But he's also a political celebrity. So I'm ambivalent, and why shouldn't I be? I like being in DEEM and to be active for it, and I work for it, but also a bit ambivalent about, like you, about this political celebrity thing, and about Berlin being this kind of Politburo. But my point was, my earlier point was, any kind of movement
You say it's
from the
inevitable.
bottom up
Yeah,
will
it's
develop,
Interesting.
inevitably
Thank
develop
you.
these kinds of things. So
Yes.
you have to be wary about it. But that doesn't mean that you cannot be part of it.
Very good. Thank you so much.
Guys, hi, my name is Jaco. I'm from South Africa. I think my comments probably have more to do with the first part of the events. I'm a former councillor for the city of Johannesburg from Raadslid, I believe is the Dutch word, the same as Afrikaans.
Raadslid.
Raadslid. for the
Raadslid.
Raadslid.
Oh, thank
I
you
never
so
get the R
much.
right,
Yes.
yeah. So I am a member of the elite and I'm a politician, but not very dangerous.
A2. Yeah.
And I think the South African experience, just on the question of who's afraid of the people, and the question, you rolled your eyes quite a bit when Dick was making the point that the elections can actually make a difference.
But it can change correct institutional
Correct
failure. That was
institutions, we have the situation, as you probably know, if you follow politics on that side of the Liberation Organization, the African National Congress, that's been in power since 1994, and that unfortunately became a bit of a BM of corruption, where things went downhill, especially from post-Nelson Mandela times, and where you currently have the situation where in last year, on my birthday, the 3rd of August, I was asking the voters, please give me the city of Johannesburg. And indeed it happened. It happened with a coalition. Interestingly enough, it was a coalition between the Liberal Democrats and the populists called the Economic Freedom Front. And it happened because of the point that was made that the governing party was out of touch with the people who saw that their day-to-day lives were being affected by the corruption and by the lack of governance, the lack of corporate governance, and so on. And they voted accordingly. They came out in numbers to vote, and it made a difference. And it influenced institutions. Obviously, the governing party, I think it's pretty much the Titanic that has struck the iceberg, and it's going to sink in 2019. Make a note in your diary to check when is elections in 2019 for South Africa, because I think it will be an interesting historic day when a massive organization from Africa is actually removed from power in a democratic way. And I think, unfortunately, you are spoiled here. My goodness.
Thank you so much for that perspective. That's true.
You have a democracy, a proportional situation where your political parties are quite close to each other. It's either this guy or that guy who's going to have the majority after tomorrow, and it's not going to make a massive difference to your life, unless, of course, it's that guy with the hair, which would be unfortunate. But it's an interest. I think what is important for perspective is to just stand back a bit and see that your situation is slightly different.
True.
It's not the only example of democracy out there. In South Africa, it's starting to make a massive difference. The opposition have taken over the massive city, the major city of Johannesburg, the capital city of Pretoria, and the main port city of
No, you're right.
And then just on to close off on the whole thing about bottoms up.
You speak into the mic.
The whole thing of bottom up
versus
top down. That the point that was made is that it needs to be a top down system, and I just want to, I'm worried about that, because it's all good and well to say that professional politicians should take the lead in things, and I'm a politician myself. I am, by the way, the Democratic Alliance representative for the Netherlands. I was elected yesterday. You can buy me champagne downstairs in a bar after this. And but it was professional politicians who told people lies and influenced the voting in Brexit.
Yes.
It was a professional politician who scared the hell out of people in the United States to make them decide that these little fears and issues that I had at home were actually real, and that yes, there is actually such a thing as a foreign terrorist in the United States, never mind the fact that the domestic terrorists kill many more people. So the point is, we need to civic education. The second most powerful bottoms-up force is voting. The most powerful, of course, is apathy. Brexit was not won by the people who voted. It was lost by the people who didn't come out to vote, because the message just wasn't strong enough, or people decided, what's the point, it's not going to happen anyway. So civic involvement, getting out there, getting people to understand that they're important. I think that's what needs to be done.
Thank you also. Thank you for really putting this conversation into a context of the value of voting into a representative democracy. You're right. Thank you so much for doing that, and also your perspective on experts into politics. Yes, or professional politicians and their role in it. Yes.
I get back to what you said, both of you, about the scale. And the scale. The scale, that's as you said, it's a small city. It's cozy. It's a couple of thousands people, and we do that. And we are to 45,000 people in whole Europe, and it's big. There is not a question of the scale. What I'm saying is a question of principle. If you are talking about Europe, it doesn't mean that you are living in Europe. You are living in the network where you are living, and that living can be neighborhood, can be your own network, can be your family. If you want to eat an elephant, you eat him bite by bite. There is no human being who can eat elephant in one bite, and that is. I
actually don't know whether people can eat elephants by piece.
But the fact is, and that is the difference what you make about what is happening in the daily life, and very intellectual subjects like talking about the Europe and everything.
And so
And
how would you,
sorry,
how would
if I
you
was-
organize?
back to the fact that everybody
Very
is
intellectual
living.
subjects.
Everybody is living in at the street, and if you can change that at your street, you can talk about Europe, but just don't get you organized in
Otherwise you
in
But
should-
first,
Europe.
these are also
Otherwise,
kinds
you
of
should keep your mouth shut. Is that what you're suggesting? Otherwise, you should keep your mouth shut because you're an intellectual.
No. I think that is the qualification as a scales. That is exactly the problem. The qualification as scales. The current politic and the politicians and the politic parties thinks that is have a politic at the nation level is more value than at the municipality level.
But I'm gonna now stop this debate, right? I mean, about this discussion, perhaps the next time about the relevance of scale and organizing principles. I'm gonna leave that now because if I look at the time, it's 2:30.
All right.
Sorry for that. And I want to. There are two people there, so I'm gonna allow your questions, and then we're gonna end this session because we already talked for 2 hours. You cannot expect. I didn't expect it, but yeah, it's already.
Hi, I'm Roxanne. I'm from the Netherlands. Thank you for a very interesting discussion.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you. I was missing an element that's for me very important, and that's the influence of digitalization on the democratic process.
Yeah.
And it's not only how people interact and how they participate in society, but also the big companies that
Influence democracy.
influence us and have more power
Yeah.
than the elected representatives.
The
in
algorithms of
democracy.
Facebook who actually,
For example,
influence.
but there are many more, of
Yeah,
course.
of course.
So it's like I'm watching a very interesting but very old discussion. And where's the new element in this? And I really think there's a big risk
Thank
for
you.
all of us in this. So.
Thank you for actually showing us. I don't know whether this is like an old school discussion, because when I asked about digitalization, you said, okay, but you're right. I mean, this perspective wasn't mentioned, and it should have been, and now it has by you. Thank you so much.
Thanks for that.
You made a comment about how to keep organizations effectively and at the same time horizontal. And through the last 20 years, more or less, I'm involved in many different organizations. And one tool we were using was to make the principal the boss. The leader, not the puppet. We don't have puppets. We have the principle. For instance, some time ago, how can I make it short? So I would like to suggest you, maybe we don't have any more time to think about it, but how is it possible to make it effective? That instead of and my energy was focused on that because we were trying to avoid being hijacked. Every organization that has the power to grow, it will be hijacked from one way or another. How you avoid that? How you avoid that you start with a beautiful idea and within 1 or 2 years some other people come and convert it into a totally different thing. So in order to avoid that, I discovered, maybe, for me, I discovered, but maybe it existed already for many years, was the principal is the leader. And I don't have much time.
The principal is the leader.
So how to make the principal the leader? So we are not depending on a representative. That's a hint, maybe we can talk about
Repeating and education. Repeating and education.
I have a lot of experience with it. Meanwhile,
And we cannot talk about it anymore because.
Who educates the educators?
And last
who educates?
last reaction, a very short one. My friend from South Africa, he said, "You are spoiled," and I have a problem with that. Because why I have a problem with that? Very often when I have conversation and discussions with people, about the problems we have in the Netherlands, people say to us, "Yeah, but you are so spoiled." No, I am. Why you are so spoiled? Why I'm so spoiled? Yeah, you saw how is it in India? How is it in Africa? No, I refuse to put down my standards just because somewhere else people are not capable in putting their standards higher.
Okay.
So I would like people to consider that at all times.
I'm going to give you the final word. Thank you, audience, for such a terrific participation. If somebody in the audience stroke a note with you or said something really interesting, can you applaud for that person, please? No. Interesting silence. Why is she actually asking? Is she asking to applaud?
People
Yeah.
are puzzled.
Thank you so much. People were puzzled. And the other, thank you so much for that. And then I would like to give the final word to you, Hille, because of course you all came all the way from Estonia.
Well, not to use the special logistical position,
It's
but
not
just to answer,
logistical.
just to answer you. Yes, I very deliberately said that the channel is of secondary importance. But yes, I do acknowledge all the threats and risks that lure in the digital society. But again, and you talked about adhering to the principles rather than, any environment or any leader or any concrete person. It also adheres here. I have been part of open data community, and we have a principle. We will keep transparency and openness, even though we know that the trolls will come. We know for certain that the trolls will come.
And still it
but
will
we
be
are
open.
not, making hands up and closing some of our procedures just because of that.
And then you try to deal with those trolls when it happens. Enlightened understanding. I mean, trying to get open information flows into your community. Okay, Hille, thank you for being here
Thank
at the
you.
table the entire
Thank you.
evening. Thank you so much to the Dutch experts, to this excellent, I would say, itinerative conversation, this journey into asking ourselves, what is the people? How can we actually be effective democrats? I hope you learned something. I certainly did tonight.
I did.
And thank you so much for this conversation.
Thanks. That was very